Welcome to Handmade History.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sonia.
And this week we are talking about amigurumi. So I needed a break from the distant past after diving deep into lace, and I wanted to do something more modern. And great news, the word amigurumi was probably invented less than 100 years ago, probably in about 1950. So Sonia, you showed me an amigurumi that you made.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us about it again?
Yeah, so it's a creature from a video game I play from Stardew Valley.
It's really cute.
It's called a Junimo, and it's shaped like an apple.
It's very nice green color. It's very, very cute.
Yeah, I didn't know the word amigurumi, though, when I made it, but...
You didn't?
I did not.
Wow. So yours is kind of big, though. It's like a plushie.
Mm-hmm.
So is that what you called it, or did you call it something else?
I guess, yeah, just like a stuffed Junimo.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive in.
Okay. What is amigurumi? It's a Japanese word that comes from amu, which means crocheted or knitted, and nuigurumi, which means stuffed doll. And they are knitted or crocheted stuffed toys. And they can be animals, plants, characters, pretty much anything. And they're often associated with cute things, but they do not have to be cute.
Yes.
Typically, amigurumi are crocheted. Crocheting is a method of making fabric from yarn that uses a hook. People often confuse it with knitting, which uses two needles. And crocheting lends itself very easily to visual pattern making. Annie Obachan writes in Amigurumi Animals, which was published in 2008, quote, "In Japan, they just use charts."
Yeah, and I think that crochet is popular for these because I personally think crochet is very forgiving and it's easy to add in stitches and make like new sections for three-dimensional objects. But you have more experience with this than I do, Sonia. What do you think? You're the big crocheter.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to like work in the round, especially in crochet. So when you're making something that has like a head or a body, I think crochet is more intuitive.
Yeah. But people do both. So I wanted to shout out a source that was a huge help in researching this. A lot of the information in this podcast comes from a master's thesis and a book. And the thesis was written by Jennifer Ramirez and Katrina Heljaka. And the book was written by Jennifer Ramirez. It's called Amigurumi. And she was very kind to send me a PDF so that I could read it. So the thesis in the book are research that Jennifer Ramirez did into the history of amigurumi, and she went to Japan to interview artists there, including the daughter of the first recorded amigurumi artist in Japan. And her website is called thesunandtheturtle.com, and her handle online is thesunandtheturtle. She's on Instagram. Thank you so much. So let's go back and talk about some of the first fiber arts in Japan. According to Yoshihiro Matsushita, a historian, there are records dating back to 1185 of a version of null binding in Japan. So in our episode about null binding, which is our second most popular episode after our first episode, we mentioned that null binding was found pretty much everywhere. So it was also found in Japan. During the Edo period, which was from 1603 to 1867, the Japanese traded with the Dutch, and it's possible that the Dutch brought knitting to Japan at this point. There is evidence that samurais knit garments, covers, and decorations for their gear. Knitting also might have been learned by sex workers in Japanese brothels. And then during the Meiji period, which went from 1868 to 1912, Japanese society shifted away from the feudal system and introduced a Western-based education system. And they did this by sending students abroad to learn and by inviting over 3,000 Westerners to teach different subjects, including needlework. So an early pattern made in 1920 of a twigged loquat, loquat's a kind of fruit, was found by a researcher named Dai Watanabe, and other patterns were published in 1908, 1927, and 1928, and 1939 of animals. However, none of these were called amigurumi.
In 1951, we find the first use of the word amigurumi as a noun. It appeared in a book by Andori Shah, a publishing house, and it included animal designs that were crocheted. And in 1955, another book was published, and it was called Amigurumi and Amigurumi.
Why were amigurumi invented at this time? So after World War II, which ended in 1945, there was economic and cultural devastation in Japan. Annie Obachan, who we mentioned earlier, wrote a book called Amigurumi Animals, and she gives kind of an overview of the history of amigurumi at the beginning. And she writes, at the end of World War II, atom bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan lost its political strength and its ancient culture, leaving behind a country like a lost child to be reborn and reformed with a deliberate avoidance of what happened before. It was not possible to think about what had happened. A new culture of cuteness served as a mask for all the atrocities. This was in the years leading up to 1950. Also at the same time, the U.S. occupied Japan after World War II from 1946 through 1952. And the U.S. gave Japan food and agricultural equipment, and crafts were actually chosen as a way that Japanese people could pay for resources. So people might have knitted and crocheted as a way to pay for food and other things that they needed. They may also have made handmade toys as an affordable alternative to buying toys for their children or for each other as little gifts. So this was a period of economic depression and upheaval for Japan. In 1950, the Korean War spurred the economy of Japan, and Japanese goods were in high demand around the world. The economy was lifted, and people started to have more time and money to do leisure activities. And so that could be one reason why pattern books were starting to be published and why they might include amigurumi. And in Japan, amigurumi is actually an art form. The Japanese Amigurumi Association formed in 1995 and held its first exhibition in 2001. They held a 20th anniversary exhibition in 2015, and they have published many books from their exhibitions. So the people who do amigurumi there are not always just hobbyists the way they are in the US, and in other places around the world, they're actually artists.
Japanese culture still heavily influences this craft. Amigurumi is still associated with Japan despite being done in many countries around the world. Jennifer Ramirez, the researcher and amigurumi artist, was born in Colombia and emigrated to Finland. She traveled to Japan to research. She cites research by a variety of people who explore the connection between amigurumi and Japanese culture and religious beliefs. So there's a few different threads here, like animism and shintoism. Animism is a belief that everything has a spirit. Takashi Izukawa, an amigurumi researcher, writes, amigurumi stems from animism, a philosophy and the foundation of many Japanese traditions and customs. Dr. Mitsukuri Yoshida, a historian of science, writes that in animism, objects can have names just as humans do. Other researchers, like Taro Koyama and Kunichika Miki, pointed out that, quote, it is not peculiar for animals or plants to speak and become heroes or heroines in Japanese novels. And it's easy to see a connection between fruit with a face and animism.
Yes. And Shintoism is another belief that is relevant here. Shintoism includes the idea that, quote, each aspect of nature has its own invisible god. The connection between amigurumi and nature, animals, and plants could embody this belief. And when I was reading about this, about Shintoism, it made me think of My Neighbor Totoro, that movie, which is so charming. And there's a god of the forest who only the kids can see. So I think that these two belief systems, animism and Shintoism, which are an important part of Japanese culture, certainly influence the fiber arts there and can explain the way that amigurumis tend to be inanimate objects or beings from nature, why they often have a face, and why they often have made-up personas or personalities. Annie Obachan also writes about a connection between the Japanese writing system and their use of charts in knitting and crochet. So she wrote, Japanese writing comprises pictures and symbols, and knitting and crochet stitches are represented in the same way. And she also says, amigurumi seems to have grown naturally with the way the charts developed. In her words, charts are designed as a full picture of how a pattern is expected to evolve. They show you where you are heading. Let your eyes roll around and around the spiraled paths and kaleidoscopic circles, and they will take you on a rhythmic journey toward finding a new friend. Meditating in circles and lines gives us plenty of time to conjure up extraordinary personae. So I thought that was an interesting take on the origins of amigurumi. She seemed to believe that it kind of evolved from the symbols and the charts and just kind of naturally happened. So she saw a very strong connection between the charts and actually like the invention of the amigurumis.
So now let's talk about amigurumi personalities. It's very common for amigurumis to have names and little stories about them, and they can also be photographed in scenes and can be based on famous characters like Pokemon or Disney characters.
I actually have 2 Pokemon cards that are illustrated with amigurumi. They're made by Asoko Ito, and they have little scenes just like all the Pokemon in the Pokemon cards do. But these scenes are actually made out of other fiber arts, like there are hand-stitched clouds in the background of one of them. They're so cute.
That's cute. They're very cool cards.
They're awesome. Jennifer Ramirez compares amigurumi and their associated stories to characters like Barbie and My Little Pony, who have whole personalities and stories attached to them. And they also remind me of squishmallows, who have names. These are like really squishy plushies that kids like to collect. They're super, super soft, but they're kind of big. And they're really, really cute. And they all have, like a name and a little personality.
Amigurumi are also associated with cuteness, which in Japan is embodied in the artistic style called kawaii, or sometimes chibi. So they have faces with big eyes, sometimes they'll have big heads, or they'll be very small. And kawaii is a Japanese aesthetic that evolved in Japan in the 1960s. So it could be the counterpart to strict conservative traditions. The word comes from kawaiushi, which means pathetic or pitiful. Chibi is another related word which means small and cute. Amigurumis do not have to be cute or have faces or be small. In fact, in the US, crocheted plushies are often big. But these traditions are quite common. A very popular amigurumi kit available right now, the Woobles, is definitely focused on cute and small creatures, and we'll talk more about them later.
Yes, the Woobles are super cute. So I thought we would talk about 2 important amigurumi artists. And the first one is the oldest or the first amigurumi artist documented in Japan. Her name was Toshi Iwatsuki. She was born in 1925. She was taught to crochet by her mother, who would have been educated during the Meiji period. And Toshi Iwatsuki wrote pattern books about play food. And the books were called Grandma Teaches the Amigurumi of Fruits and Vegetables. Very charming. Her books included lots of diagrams and written instructions. And as you can tell from her titles, she made lots of fruits and vegetables, other food, but also dolls and animals. And I saw a video, which was in Japanese, so I couldn't understand it, but you got to see Toshi Iwatsuki showing off all of her many crocheted amigurumis and actually doing some crocheting. And the examples that she had, the amigurumis that she had made were really amazing. The thing that stood out to me were the very fun, accurate details. For example, there was a mushroom, and the cap of the mushroom actually hung over the stem. So it looked really like a mushroom. And the stem was attached to an indent in the mushroom bottom, not just like a flat bottom. So it's kind of like cute and accurate.
Mm.
And there was another little doll that was a duck that had an egg inside it. And then the egg opened up and revealed a baby duck. Very, very cute. Toshi Iwatsuki held 8 exhibitions in Nagoya. She passed away in 2014, and she made her living as an amigurumi artist.
So moving forward in time, Tomoko Takamori is responsible for the modern amigurumi as we picture it. Ramirez calls her, quote, the most influential amigurumi artist in Japan. Tomoko Takamori began as an illustrator and switched to amigurumi in 1993. She also gave lessons and published books. Her amigurumi were used in movies, music videos, and ads, and she was called a pioneer of modern amigurumi. The amigurumi that we picture today is hugely influenced by her work, and you can see designs on Ravelry. They have slightly bigger heads sometimes, and they typically have faces. They look very like normal to us today, and it's hard to remember that this type of thing didn't exist in the US when we were kids. But now, very cute amigurumi are very common. And the amigurumi kawaii style has definitely influenced commercially made stuffed animals like Squishmallows.
Yes, totally. Amigurumi became popular in the US kind of starting in the 1990s. The first appearance of the word on Google Books is in 1990, and it became super popular in the early 2000s. I found a book called Hooked for Life by Mary Bader Temple, which was published in 2009, and it's a memoir and pattern book about crochet. And she wrote about amigurumi and kind of the craze that was happening. And she said, what I do like about amigurumi is that they have turned a lot of people who are not otherwise crochet lovers into crochet lovers. So amigurumi was drawing new people into the craft of crochet at the time. Another artist, Anna Hratchovek, created Mochi Mochi Land in 2007, and that is a knitted amigurumi studio. And she made a GIF that is super famous that you may have seen of a gnome knitting hearts that float up into the air like balloons. And the gnome has tiny knitting needles.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
I think so.
It's adorable. So she actually made that little animation. Amigurumi also got a boost about 10 years later during the pandemic when Gen Z started crocheting lots of plushies. Sonia, I believe you were right on trend.
I was right. Yeah.
When did you crochet your plushie?
Like 2021. I probably spent a lot of time on the internet during 2020 looking at people crocheting them. And then I was like, I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And these plushies were big and huggable. They were soft, made from acrylic yarn, which I think is true of all you are like a textbook.
Yeah.
You made a textbook Gen Z pandemic plushie.
I used the blanket yarn.
Amazing. And then just this past holiday season, I saw many, many Woobles. So we mentioned them. Woobles is a company that makes learn to crochet kits, but in each kit you make an amigurumi. And the characters are like donuts, animals, all different kinds of things. And they all have names, and sometimes they're even characters from shows. So this seems like a really encapsulates a lot of the things that have become popular with amigurumi, and it's available. Like I see them everywhere.
Yeah, I see them online a lot.
Yeah, they're very cute. So Sonia, any final thoughts about amigurumi?
Well, I've seen a lot of it recently, probably starting with the pandemic or like with Instagram and TikTok. So I didn't realize it's pretty recent for the stuff we've looked at, but it's a pretty long history.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know.
Yeah. I didn't know that it went all the way back to 1950.
Yeah.
It was also interesting reading about kind of like the cultural origins of amigurumi because it's very interesting.
Yeah.
They've got such personalities and they're so fun and cute. You can kind of instantly recognize an amigurumi when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to say that learning about this history was surprisingly difficult because my thought was, I'm researching something that's like less than 100 years old. This will be a piece of cake, but it wasn't true. Mm-hmm. Because I don't speak Japanese or live in Japan, it was very hard to find anything about amigurumi in English. We're super grateful to Jennifer Ramirez both for doing this research and for sharing with us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have an amigurumi or a plushie that you want to share with us, you can email it to us at handmadehistoryhosts, that's HOSTS @gmail.com. Or you can find us on Blue Sky or Tumblr. We're at Handmade History Pod on Blue Sky or Handmade History Podcast on Tumblr. We're also on Instagram at Handmade History Podcast. Bye.
Bye.
And recording.